In 1515, a woman named Margaret Schmidt was dragged into a Nuremberg dungeon, screaming that she would rather burn at the stake than face what awaited her inside. Within just 6 hours, she was begging her captors to end her life. But that's not even the worst part. What Margaret faced was a device so psychologically devastating that hardened criminals would confess to crimes they hadn't committed simply to avoid it, a machine that could break the strongest minds without shedding a single drop of blood. In a chilling twist, the church considered this method merciful. By the end of this video, you'll understand why historians have tried to bury this story and why the psychological techniques employed in this medieval nightmare are still debated by interrogation experts today. Before we delve into this dark chapter of human cruelty, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll need something to distract your mind after what you're about to learn. I'm about to reveal 3 shocking truths. A device so horrific that prisoners chose death over enduring it. A torture method that shattered human minds in mere hours. And the disturbing reasoning behind why this machine was actually deemed an act of mercy. ## The horror of the Iron Maiden. To grasp the true horror that awaited Margaret Schmidt in that Nuremberg dungeon, you need to picture medieval Europe in the 5th, 10th, and 16th centuries. This era was characterized by justice that prioritized extracting confessions rather than rehabilitation. The church and state had perfected the art of enhanced interrogation. But here's what many don't realize. By this time, torturers had discovered something far more effective than breaking bones or burning flesh. They learned that the human mind was more fragile than the body. Physical torture had its limitations. A person could pass out, go into shock, or die before revealing their secrets. In contrast, psychological torture could continue indefinitely, keeping the victim conscious and acutely aware of their suffering. Authorities needed confessions for witch trials, heresy accusations, and political conspiracies, and they required these confessions to be detailed, specific, and implicating others. Traditional methods of torture were yielding too many deaths and too little useful information, so they innovated. What emerged was a device that would redefine human suffering forever. It didn't rely on pain. It instead tapped into something far more primitive and unsettling, the human imagination. Today, we explore the torture device that made grown men weep before they even touched it, that caused women to confess to witchcraft within hours, and that shattered the human spirit to the point where victims would beg for death as a mercy. This is the story of the Iron Maiden, not the version you think you know. What I'm about to share will change how you view both medieval justice and the darkest corners of human psychology. ### The mechanism of suffering. The machine awaiting Margaret Schmidt was not designed for a quick death. Picture yourself standing in a dank stone chamber, torches flickering on damp walls. Before you stands what looks like a metal coffin, roughly human-shaped, with a grotesque face carved into its surface, this face twisted into an expression of eternal agony. As the executioner opens the front panel, you see the interior lined with iron spikes. But here's what nobody tells you about the true horror of the Iron Maiden. Those spikes were not meant for a quick kill. Hans Schmidt, the Nuremberg executioner from 1501 to 1532, recorded in his personal diary the chilling truth. The spikes were meticulously measured and positioned to pierce the body without hitting vital organs. The points enter at the shoulders, chest, and legs, Schmidt noted. But the condemned can survive for many hours, perhaps even days, if we are careful with the placement. Yet physical pain was not the worst aspect. It was the torment of waiting. Imagine being enclosed in this metal coffin, unable to move, with the iron spikes pressing against your skin. Every breath pushes the spikes slightly deeper. Every heartbeat sends jolts of pain through your body. You can't see anything, can't move, only wait. And here's where the psychological manipulation comes into play. Before closing the door, the executioner would describe exactly what would happen. He'd explain how the spikes would slowly dig deeper with each breath, how your own body would become your torturer, and how you could end the suffering at any moment simply by confessing. Schmidt's diary records that most prisoners broke within the first hour, not from pain, but from the mental anguish of anticipating what was to come. Margaret Schmidt confessed to consorting with the devil after just 2 hours in the Maiden, providing the names of 17 other supposed witches and begging for immediate execution. Darker turn, the viewing Iron Maiden, but the story doesn't end there. The authorities in Nuremberg had discovered a modification that made the traditional Iron Maiden seem like child's play. They added small viewing holes to the device's face, enabling victims to see into the chamber. Why would they do this? They discovered that complete sensory deprivation was not as effective as partial sensory input. Through these holes, prisoners could watch other victims being tortured, observe the executioner preparing his tools, and see the faces of the crowd gathered to witness their suffering. Yet they could not scream effectively, could not beg for mercy. They were trapped in a living nightmare. Records from the Spanish Inquisition detail the psychological damage this induced. One such entry recounts the heretic Maria Gonzalez, who was placed in the viewing Iron Maiden. According to the 1487 documentation, by the hour of 2, she had confessed to heretical practices. By the hour of 6, she had named her accomplices. By evening prayer, she was begging the guards to end her torment by any means necessary. That's a complete psychological breakdown in less than 6 hours. What makes this technique so devastatingly effective? It exploits a fundamental aspect of human psychology that modern neuroscience helps us understand. When you can see but cannot act, when you can observe but cannot participate, your brain can descend into a state of learned helplessness far more damaging than any physical pain. You become a prisoner not only of the device but also of your own mind. Dr. Margaret Rothsky, a modern psychologist specializing in historical torture methods, explains that the viewing holes created a paradox of awareness. The victim was simultaneously isolated and exposed, hidden and observed. This cognitive dissonance can break the human psyche faster than any physical trauma. Inquisition records reveal that victims in the viewing Iron Maiden would often provide not just confessions, but also detailed accusations against family members, friends, and neighbors, anything to make the psychological torment cease. The Iron Maiden of Mercy, but don't click away just yet, because what happened next made the initial Iron Maiden seem merciful in comparison. In 1523, Pope Adrian issued a papal bull authorizing the Church's so-called Iron Maiden of Mercy. The document, preserved in the Vatican secret archives, reveals the twisted reasoning behind this so-called improvement. The merciful version eliminated the spikes entirely. At first glance, this seemed like a genuine advancement, a torture device without the torture. However, the Church had stumbled upon something far more sinister, the power of pure psychological warfare. Picture yourself locked inside a metal coffin in complete darkness, unable to move with just enough air to survive. There are no spikes threatening to pierce your flesh and no immediate physical danger, just an agonizing weight. The papal authorization documents reveal the diabolical psychology behind this design. The sinner, facing the prospect of indefinite confinement in darkness, would be compelled to contemplate their sins and seek absolution through truthful confession. But here is the horrifying reality: prisoners in the merciful Iron Maiden suffered complete sensory deprivation combined with the psychological terror of not knowing when or if they would ever be released. Brother Francesco de Marco, a monk who administered this torture in Rome, kept meticulous records of its effectiveness. His journals described prisoners who began hallucinating within hours, hearing voices of deceased family members or seeing demons in the darkness. One entry details Lorenzo Medici, suspected of heresy, who was placed in the Maiden of Mercy at dawn. By midday he was weeping. By evening he was conversing with his dead mother. By the following dawn he had confessed to practicing witchcraft, despite the absence of any evidence. Most disturbingly, prisoners who had experienced both versions of the Iron Maiden often begged to be put back into the spiked version rather than endure the merciful one. "The pain of the spikes is nothing compared to the pain of the mind," wrote one prisoner in a letter smuggled out of a papal prison. "At least with the spikes, you know your suffering has a limit. In the darkness, your suffering has no end." The Church celebrated this progress, believing that because no blood was shed and no bones were broken, technically no physical harm was inflicted. They thought they had developed a humane method of extracting confessions. However, there's a chilling truth behind the Iron Maiden that fundamentally changed our understanding of medieval torture. The empty Iron Maiden. Are you ready for the most shocking revelation of all? Many Iron Maidens were often completely empty. Archaeological excavations of medieval torture chambers across Europe have revealed something that historians have tried to keep quiet for decades. Many of the Iron Maidens found in castle dungeons and Inquisition chambers show no evidence of ever being used. No blood stains on the spikes, no wear patterns from struggling prisoners, no scratch marks from fingernails clawing at the interior. Instead, what they found were elaborate mechanisms designed to create sound effects. Dr. Heinrich Müller, who led excavations at Nuremberg Castle in 1987, discovered a series of pulleys, bells, and echo chambers built into the Iron Maiden's base. When activated, these mechanisms could simulate the sounds of a prisoner trapped inside groaning, pleading, even the sound of spikes penetrating flesh. The ultimate psychological torture was not physical at all. It was pure theater. Hear us how it worked? A prisoner would be brought into the torture chamber and shown the Iron Maiden. They would hear testimonies from previous victims, actually paid actors, describing the horrors they had supposedly endured. They would listen to the realistic sounds of someone being tortured inside the device. Then they would be told that they could avoid this fate by confessing immediately or suffer it themselves. The confession rate was over 90%. The Spanish Inquisition perfected this technique, creating what they dubbed theaters of confession, entire chambers designed to break prisoners psychologically before any physical torture ever began. This discovery fundamentally altered how historians understand medieval justice. We once believed this period was defined by brutal physical torture, but the truth is far more sophisticated and sinister. These weren't just torturers. They were experts in psychological warfare. The techniques used with the Iron Maiden directly influenced modern interrogation practices, including the good cop bad cop routine, the use of psychological pressure instead of physical force, and even the creation of false scenarios to extract confessions. Military psychologists studying these historical records helped develop interrogation techniques used in World War II, the Cold War, and even contemporary counterterrorism operations. The most disturbing consequence of all? The false confessions obtained through Iron Maiden theater fueled the European witch trials. Thousands of innocent people were executed based on confessions extracted through pure psychological manipulation. The device that was intended to reveal the truth instead manufactured elaborate lies, turning neighbors against each other, families against themselves, and entire communities into engines of persecution. The Iron Maiden faded from European torture chambers by the late 16th century, not due to its inhumanity, but because authorities realized confessions gained through psychological manipulation were often useless for actual criminal investigations. Yet its legacy lives on in ways that continue to shape our world today. The Iron Maiden offers a chilling lesson about human nature, that our minds are more fragile than our bodies, and that the most devastating forms of torture require no physical violence whatsoever. This device changed the very nature of justice, transforming confession from an act of conscience into a product of psychological manipulation. It revealed that fear could be manufactured, guilt could be implanted, and that the truth could be shaped by those who control the narrative. Today, we still grapple with these lessons. False confessions remain a leading cause of wrongful convictions. Psychological interrogation techniques evolve continually, and the line between justice and psychological coercion remains alarmingly thin. The Iron Maiden may be gone, but its shadow looms over our legal systems, our understanding of human psychology, and our definitions of humane treatment. So here's my question for you. Think deeply before you answer. Given what we know about the power of psychological manipulation, how can we ever be sure that any confession is truly voluntary? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this exploration of history's darkest innovations as unsettling as I did, be sure you're subscribed. Next week, I'll reveal the medieval execution method that was so horrific it was banned by the church itself, and the disturbing reason it's making a comeback in some parts of the world today. Thank you for watching.